Everyone in Southeast Asia knows Grab. It's your everyday, everything app. Rides, food, payments, daily life. But what most people forget is this: Uber entered Southeast Asia first. And still, Grab took over the market. Uber didn't lose Southeast Asia because it was weak. It lost because it misunderstood the battlefield. So if Uber didn't lose Southeast Asia because it was weak, we need to understand where Uber's strength came from in the first place. Before Southeast Asia, before Grab, before the super app era, Uber was already rewriting how cities moved. It wasn't a small startup experimenting with ideas. It was a company that had already changed transportation in major cities around the world. To understand why Uber entered Southeast Asia with so much confidence, and why that confidence didn't translate into victory, we have to go back to how Uber started. Uber started with a simple but powerful idea. In 2009 in San Francisco, getting a taxi was unreliable, expensive, and frustrating. So instead of reinventing transportation, Uber focused on removing friction. With a single tap on a phone, a car would arrive and payment would happen automatically. At the time, that experience felt almost magical. Uber wasn't just building an app, it was building infrastructure for on-demand movement. The model was clean, efficient, and scalable, and cities around the world adopted it quickly. What worked in San Francisco began working in London, New York, and beyond. As Uber expanded, it developed confidence, not arrogance, but belief. Belief that a single, well-designed system could work everywhere. Backed by massive venture funding, strong engineering talent, and a rapidly growing brand, Uber became synonymous with ride-hailing itself. Uber didn't see itself as a local startup solving city-specific problems. It saw itself as a global platform. And that mindset, the one that made Uber unstoppable in many markets, is exactly what shaped how it entered Southeast Asia. Now, Grab started very differently. In 2012, Southeast Asia wasn't struggling with convenience. It was struggling with reliability and safety. Transportation was fragmented. Taxis were inconsistent. Payments were mostly cash. And in many cities, everyday commuters relied on motorcycles more than cars. Grab didn't begin with a grand global vision. It began with a local problem. Originally launched as a taxi-hailing app in Malaysia, Grab focused on making everyday transport safer and more predictable. Features like driver identification, fare transparency, and local support weren't nice to have, they were essential. Grab was built for how Southeast Asia actually moved. Instead of forcing users to adapt to the app, Grab adapted to the market. It embraced cash payments, motorcycles, and city-by-city differences. It listened closely to drivers, passengers, and regulators, adjusting its product based on real-world behavior. Grab didn't grow by scaling one perfect system everywhere. It grew by learning fast, localizing deeply, and solving problems one city at a time. From the very beginning, Grab wasn't trying to conquer the world. It was trying to fit into everyday life. When Uber entered Southeast Asia, it didn't come quietly. It arrived with confidence, capital, and the reputation of a global winner. In many cities, Uber wasn't just another app. It was seen as the future of transportation. Uber launched first in major urban centers like Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, and Manila, targeting cities with higher smartphone penetration and growing middle-class demand. The experience felt premium. The app was polished. The cars were clean. For many users, Uber introduced a new standard for what ride-hailing could be. Backed by massive funding, Uber moved aggressively. It offered discounts to riders, incentives to drivers, and expanded quickly across the region. This wasn't experimentation. It was a proven Silicon Valley playbook executed at speed. Uber believed that scale and technology would do what they had done elsewhere: overwhelm local competitors. And for a while, it worked. Uber gained visibility, attracted drivers, and built early market share. It had first-mover advantage in key cities, and that mattered. It set expectations. It shaped user behavior. It showed Southeast Asia what app-based ride-hailing looked like. But beneath that strong entry was a quiet assumption that Southeast Asia would respond the same way other markets had, and that assumption would soon be tested. Grab didn't beat Uber overnight, it outlearned it. While Uber pushed the same global model across cities, Grab kept adjusting. It expanded beyond cars into motorcycles, food delivery, and everyday services that matched how people in Southeast Asia actually lived. Where Uber focused on efficiency, Grab focused on usefulness. The app wasn't just for getting from point A to point B, it became part of daily routines. Grab also went deeper locally. It built stronger relationships with drivers and merchants, adapted pricing and incentives city by city, and leaned into cash payments when digital wallets weren't ready yet. Every adjustment made the platform feel more familiar, more practical, and harder to replace. Over time, that difference compounded. Grab became a daily habit. Uber remained an option. As competition intensified, both companies spent heavily on subsidies. But the longer the fight dragged on, the clearer the imbalance became. Grab was building an ecosystem designed for Southeast Asia's realities. Uber was fighting a market that demanded constant localization. Eventually, Uber faced a decision: continue burning capital in a region that refused to bend to its model, or step back and preserve resources for battles elsewhere. In 2018, Uber chose to exit Southeast Asia, exchanging its operations for a stake in Grab. It wasn't a collapse, it was a strategic retreat. And with the story now clear, it's time to break down exactly why this happened, category by category. So at this point, the outcome is clear. Grab didn't win because Uber was careless, and Uber didn't leave because it suddenly became weak. What happened in Southeast Asia was a clash between two very different ways of building a business, one global, one deeply local. To really understand this battle, we need to step back from the story and break it down objectively, not by hype, not by brand loyalty, but by fundamentals. That's what we're going to do next. Let's compare Grab and Uber across 5 critical categories that decide whether a company survives or exits a market. Each category focuses on a different dimension of execution, and by the end, the result won't just make sense, it'll feel inevitable. Let's start with local understanding. This is where the gap between Grab and Uber first appeared. Uber entered Southeast Asia with a global model that had already worked in many cities. The app was standardized, efficient, and designed to scale quickly, but that approach assumed users would behave the same way everywhere. Grab took the opposite approach. It treated Southeast Asia as a collection of very different markets. Instead of forcing one system, Grab adapted to local habits, from motorcycles instead of cars, to cash payments, to local languages and city-specific needs. Those choices made Grab feel familiar and practical, not foreign. Over time, that local fit turned into a major advantage. So in this category, Grab wins because it adapted to the market instead of expecting the market to adapt to it. Next, let's talk about product strategy. This is where the difference between a service and a habit became clear. Uber's product in Southeast Asia stayed focused on one core use case: ride-hailing. It did that job well, but for most users, it was something they opened only when they needed a ride. Grab expanded far beyond transportation. It turned its app into a daily use platform, adding food delivery, payments, and everyday services that people relied on constantly. The app wasn't just useful, it became routine. That difference mattered. Daily habits create loyalty, data, and staying power. Occasional use does not. So in this category, Grab wins because it built a product people used every day, not just when they needed a ride. Now let's look at first mover advantage. This is one area where Uber deserves real credit. Uber entered Southeast Asia before Grab fully scaled. In major cities, Uber introduced many users to app-based ride-hailing for the first time. It set early expectations around convenience, pricing, and user experience. That early entry helped Uber build brand recognition, attract drivers, and gain initial market share. For a period of time, Uber wasn't chasing the market, it was defining it. Being first didn't guarantee long-term dominance, but it did give Uber momentum and visibility that mattered in the early stages of the market. So in this category, Uber wins because it entered early and shaped how ride-hailing was first experienced in Southeast Asia. Next, let's talk about the driver and merchant ecosystem. This is where long-term loyalty was decided. Uber treated drivers primarily as supply. Incentives were used to bring drivers onto the platform quickly, but the relationship stayed transactional. When incentives dropped, loyalty often dropped with them. Grab went deeper. It positioned itself as a partner to drivers and merchants, not just a platform. Drivers had more earning options through rides, food delivery, and other services. Merchants gained access to customers, logistics, and payments inside one system. That ecosystem approach created stability. Drivers and merchants weren't tied to a single feature. They were tied to the platform itself. Over time, that made Grab harder to leave and harder to replace. So in this category, Grab wins because it built an ecosystem, not just a marketplace. Finally, let's look at economics and exit strategy. This is where the battle didn't end with dominance, but with discipline. As competition intensified, both Grab and Uber spent heavily on subsidies to win riders and drivers. But the longer the fight went on, the clearer it became that Southeast Asia required constant localization and long-term investment. Uber had to decide whether to continue burning capital in a market that resisted its global model, or to step back and focus resources elsewhere. Instead of fighting indefinitely, Uber chose to exit and take an equity stake in Grab. That move preserved capital, reduced risk, and allowed Uber to redirect attention to markets where its model fit better. It wasn't a collapse, it was a calculated decision. So in this final category, Uber wins because it chose strategic exit over prolonged losses. Grab wins this battle, 3 rounds to 2. But this isn't a story about Uber failing. Uber entered Southeast Asia strong, moved first, and helped define ride-hailing at scale. Even its exit was a disciplined, strategic decision, not a collapse. Grab won because it was better aligned with the market. It built around daily behavior, local realities, and long-term habits, not just a global playbook. And here's the key takeaway. If this were a global stage battle, the score would look very different. But this wasn't a global stage. This was a Southeast Asia battle. Grab understood the battlefield, Uber respected it, and chose when to walk away. That's why Grab won Southeast Asia. Now it's your turn. Was this Southeast Asia battle fair? And what VS battle should we break down next? Drop it in the comments. And if you're not subscribed yet, hit the button and turn on that notification bell. If you're not taking a ride anywhere right now, check out this next video. I think you'll enjoy it.